vein, which enters the superior vena cava, goes through the heart, leaves through the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, the descending aorta, and then off of that is the right phrenic artery. It's just above the celiac trunk and is hard to find on most diagrams. So the right phrenic artery goes to the diaphragm, arterioles, capillaries, and venules, ACV, to the right phrenic vein. That's how it leaves the diaphragm, to the right phrenic vein, and then goes to the inferior vena cava, which goes back up to the right atrium. And that's tracing number 8. So let's do tracing number 9. Number 9, number 9, number 9. We're going to start at the left internal iliac artery down in the lower part of the body, and we're going to end up in the right femoral artery in the right leg. So we're going to start at the left internal iliac artery, which branches into the left inferior gluteal artery, and that goes to the gluteal muscles. Yeah, that's muscles of your butt, right? And we go into arterioles, capillaries, and venules, ACV, and we then leave that gluteal muscle through the left inferior gluteal vein, to the left internal iliac vein, to the left common iliac vein, and that enters the inferior vena cava, which goes to the heart, leaving the heart through the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, goes to the descending aorta, going to all the way down to the right common iliac artery, to the right external iliac artery, and finally into the right femoral artery. And that's tracing number 9. Number 9, number 9, number 9. In tracing number 10, we're going to start in the tibia, down in the lower leg, and we're going to end up in the right frontalis muscle. That is a muscle on the front side of the skull, on the frontal muscle. So let's start in the posterior tibial vein, go to the popliteal vein, which leads to the femoral vein, which goes to the external iliac vein, to the common iliac vein, and then that leads into the inferior vena cava, which goes back to the heart tracing, exit the heart through the ascending aorta, go through the aortic arch. Let's see, where we're going. Oh yeah, we're going up to the head, the frontalis muscle. So we need to go to the brachiocephalic artery, the right common carotid artery, the right external carotid artery, the right superficial temporal artery, and that leads to the frontalis muscle. We enter the muscle by going through an arteriole and into the capillary bed, an AC. And that's tracing number 10. Okay, here's the last tracing of the systemic system before we go into the fetal and the lymph system. This is tracing number 11. We're going to start in the celiac trunk, also known as the celiac artery, and we're going to go to the kidney. But we want to go there via the pancreas. So let's see how blood gets to the pancreas. So start at the celiac trunk, go through the hepatic artery, and we need to branch into the gastroduodenal artery. Gastroduodenal artery. The duodenum is part of the small intestine. That leads to the anterior superior pancreatico-duodenal artery. How do you say that again? Pancreatico-duodenal artery. And that leads directly to the pancreas. You enter the pancreas or go through the pancreas through arterioles, capillaries, and venules, thus the ACV. And you exit the pancreas in the anterior or through the anterior superior pancreatico duodenal vein, and that leads to the superior mesenteric vein, which, as you know, goes to the hepatic portal system. So the hepatic portal vein, which leads to the liver, venules, capillaries, and venules. You exit the liver through the hepatic vein, go into the inferior vena cava, go through the heart, and out the ascending aorta, aortic arch, the descending aorta, and then you want to branch to the renal artery and back to the kidney, arterial and capillaries of the kidney. And that's tracing number 11, the last of the systemic tracings. Okay, let's do tracing number 12, which is one of the lymphatic tracings. Now, something you need to know about the lymph system. The lymph system is not symmetrical. The drainage of the lymph is not symmetrical in the body. So if you take the right thorax, the right arm, and the right side of the head and neck, that goes into one drainage, and all the rest of the body goes into a separate drainage. So both legs, the left side of the thorax, and the left side of the face and head and neck go into a separate drainage. All of the right side components, they go into a lymphatic duct that enters the bloodstream at the right subclavian vein. All of the left side of the lymphatic system, it goes into the thoracic duct before it goes into the left subclavian vein. So in this one, we're going to start at the spleen, and we're going to go from the lymph system of the spleen, not the blood, and we're going to go to the liver, and we're going to go to the blood system of the liver. So we're going to start at a lymphatic vessel that's found in the spleen, and that branches into the left lumbar lymphatic trunk and enters a large sac of lymphatic tissue or lymphatic fluid, and that sac is called the cisterna chyli, sometimes called the cisterna chili, and sometimes called the cisterna chyli. You can say it however you want. The cisterna chyli is one way that I will say it. So that enters then into the thoracic duct, and as I said a moment ago, the thoracic duct goes into the left subclavian vein, which goes into, now we're in the bloodstream, right? So now it's just a blood tracing. The left brachiocephalic vein to the superior vena cava, through the heart tracing, out the ascending aorta, to the aortic arch, to the descending aorta, to the celiac trunk or celiac artery, which, remember, you can branch directly into the hepatic artery and go to the liver, arterioles and capillaries of the liver. And that's tracing number 12. Tracing 13 is another lymphatic tracing. And this one's going to go from the intestinal lymph nodes. And since it's in the intestines, all of that is going to drain to the left side, going through the thoracic duct. So it's going to go to the left subclavian vein. So we start at the intestinal lymphatic vessel, or lymph vessel, go to the intestinal trunk, to the cisterna chyli again, and once there, we go through the thoracic duct, and then we enter the bloodstream through the left subclavian vein. That leads to the left brachiocephalic vein, goes through the superior vena cava, and goes through the heart, and then out of the heart through the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, the descending aorta, through the celiac trunk or artery, to the splenic artery, to the spleen, arterioles, capillaries, and venules, and then we exit through the splenic vein, and that is tracing number 13. Tracing number 14 also starts in the lymphatic system and ends up in the blood of the spleen. We're going to start here at the left tonsil, which goes to the left cervical lymph node, the left lymphatic duct, which then goes into the thoracic duct before entering the bloodstream through the left subclavian vein, the left brachiocephalic vein to the superior vena cava, and now we do the heart tracing. Leaving the heart through the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, the descending aorta, the celiac trunk or artery, the splenic artery, and then into the spleen, arterioles and capillaries of the spleen. And that's tracing number 14. In tracing number 15, we're going to do one of the two fetal circulation tracings. We're going to start in the descending aorta of mom and go to the aortic valve in the fetus that she's carrying. So we start at the descending aorta of mom, go through the common iliac artery, the internal iliac artery, and then to the uterine artery. You could do either left or right on any of those. They all end up at the uterus. At the uterus, there's an exchange of nutrients across the placenta, but the blood does not exchange between the fetus and mom. At the placenta, which is capillaries, venules, and of the placenta in the fetus, you then enter or exit the placenta through the umbilical vein. You take the shortcut through the ductus venosus around the liver and into the inferior vena cava to the right atrium, to the foramen ovale, to the left atrium, to the bicuspid valve, also known as the left atrioventricular valve, to the left ventricle, and then to the aortic semilunar valve. In tracing number 16, we're going to stay entirely within the fetus and do the circulation from the fetus's placenta back to its placenta again. But I have chosen the route. In this tracing, you have to go through the fetal right ventricle. So we start in the placenta of the fetus at capillaries and venules there. We then go into the umbilical vein, which goes through the ductus venosus that bypasses the liver, through the inferior vena cava to the right atrium of the fetus. So we're in the right atrium of the fetus. Which way will we go? Remember that in the fetus you could go two ways because of the foramen ovale. But in this tracing, you are required to go through the right ventricle. So now you're going to have to go down through the AV valve instead of going through the foramen ovale. We go then into the right AV valve, which is also known as the tricuspid valve, through the right ventricle, and we want to then go into the pulmonary semilunar valve, the pulmonary trunk, but here we take the shortcut of going through the ductus arteriosus from the pulmonary trunk directly into the aortic arch. We're now in the aorta, so we go down the descending aorta to the common iliac artery, to the internal iliac artery, to the umbilical artery, and that leads back to the placenta. We enter the placenta through arterioles and end up in the capillaries of the placenta. And that's tracing number 16. And finally, here we are at the last tracing, the right axillary lymph nodes to the stomach. So we're going to end on a lymph tracing again, or at least we're going to start in the lymph and end up in the bloodstream. So we want to go from the right axillary lymph nodes to the blood of the stomach. So we start in the right axillary lymph nodes, the right axillary lymph vessel, to the right subclavian lymph vessel, and that goes to the right lymphatic duct. The right lymphatic duct dumps directly into the right subclavian vein. So now we are back in the bloodstream again, and the rest of this is just a blood tracing. The right brachiocephalic vein to the superior vena cava, through the heart, the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, the descending aorta, to the celiac trunk, also known as the celiac artery, to the left gastric artery, and we end up in the stomach, in arterioles, and then the capillary bed of the stomach. And that's the last tracing, tracing number 17. Now you just have to get these all together and get ready for the next lab exam.